No one believed me when I said the earth had called me. Not metaphorically, not spiritually. I mean, it spoke a low, rhythmic pulse, like the distant echo of something ancient knocking beneath the crust. And not once, but over and over for years. It started with dreams, cold dreams. I would wake up gasping, lungs burning with frost, though the air in my room was still and warm. In those dreams, I always stood alone beneath a black sky woven with violet light. Before me, an opening in the ice, wide as a cathedral door. Something waited beyond it, something old, something that knew my name. By profession, I'm a historical cartographer. I reconstruct lost maps, sometimes from fragments, sometimes from memory, sometimes from things people shouldn't remember at all. But after the dreams began, my work took on a strange shape. I became obsessed with the poles. Not the geography we know, but what wasn't on any map. What had been erased. It was in a university archive in Zurich that I found the first piece of the puzzle, buried in the appendix of a rejected doctoral thesis from 1928. A hand-drawn sketch of Antarctica, labeled not in any standard language, but in a mix of ancient Greek, Vedic Sanskrit, and something unidentifiable. At the center of the continent, a spiral. It looked like a fingerprint or a portal. The scholar who drew it, a man named Johann Albrecht, had disappeared 3 months after submitting his work. The university labeled him psychotically unstable. His room had been found covered in frost, despite the spring weather. And scribbled on the walls in charcoal was the phrase, "The sun does not only shine above." From there, the trail became stranger. Soviet documents from the 1950s referring to Operation K2 Black and a hidden geothermal anomaly near Queen Maud Land. An unclassified journal from Admiral Byrd hinting at a great unknown beyond the pole, and a city of light beneath the ice. Even older texts, Hopi prophecies, Babylonian carvings, Norse tales of Gimle, each spoke of a hidden world deep inside. I tried to rationalize it. I tried to forget, but the dreams wouldn't stop. Eventually, I gave in. I sold everything I owned, disconnected from all networks, reached out to the only man I knew would understand, a retired geologist named Lucian Navarro, who once claimed to have seen living metal in the Chilean Andes. He agreed to come, no questions asked. Together, we found a pilot mad enough to fly us to the most restricted part of Antarctica, under cover of a failing research license and a forged Soviet permit. We landed just beyond the Larsen Sea shelf. The winds screamed like dying gods. The ground shook with something deeper than tectonic movement. We set up camp beside the ruins of what looked like an old Soviet weather station. Half buried, half broken, but not dead. Its core generator still blinked. That night, I found a hatch beneath the snow lined with markings I had seen only once before on the scroll in Zurich. I didn't tell the others. Instead, I waited and listened, because it wasn't just the ice moaning in the wind anymore. There were syllables, long stretched vowels like chants in reverse, the same ones from my dreams. I opened my notebook and began to write. My hands trembled as I copied the symbols around the hatch. Each line seemed to burn into the page. I don't remember sleeping. I only remember the light, the green glow that rose from the ice itself, swirling around the hatch like breath. And then at exactly 2:03 a.m., the hatch clicked open on its own. I called Lucian. We stood in silence, staring into the staircase that descended into the frozen earth. There was warmth inside, actual heat. The air smelled of copper and rain. We didn't speak. We just looked at each other and stepped down. I should have been afraid. I should have questioned everything. But all I felt was arrival. Like the earth had finally opened its door to me. Not as an intruder, as a child returned. I don't know what lies at the bottom of that spiral. I don't know who carved the path or why the air sings in harmonics that no human throat can replicate. But I know this: the earth is not what we were taught. It breathes, it remembers, and now it is waking. The steps went deeper than we expected, far deeper. At first the stone was rough, glacial rock grooved and cracked as if nature itself had carved a passage. But the further we descended, the smoother the walls became, until they resembled obsidian polished by centuries. It felt deliberate, engineered. No one said it, but we all knew. Lucian walked ahead of me, his lantern casting flickering shadows on the walls. Behind us, Caroline the linguist muttered to herself, her fingers tracing the glyphs carved into the passage. She wasn't reading them. Not yet. But she was starting to recognize them. No one asked who had carved them. It felt disrespectful somehow, like speaking in a cathedral while the altar burns. The air grew warmer with every step. That more than anything unsettled me. We were going deeper into the ice, and yet our breath no longer fogged. The warmth wasn't dry either. It was humid, alive, like breathing in the breath of something slumbering. I glanced back at the entrance one last time. It was gone, sealed behind layers of green mist that now pulsed in rhythm. We were committed. There was no turning back. At around 300 feet, the staircase widened into a gallery. That's the only word that fits, a gallery. Both walls were covered in murals, ancient, complex, and impossibly intact. Not painted, but etched with glowing pigment that shimmered faintly as we passed. The scenes defied logic. One showed a vast tree, its roots piercing the earth's crust, its branches holding suns between them. Around it, human-like figures knelt, hands raised in reverence. Another showed a ringed world, inside a shell, floating in space with both inner and outer civilizations depicted, mirror reflections, yet visibly different. And at the center of both, a great eye. Caroline stopped walking, her lips parted. "It's a cosmology," she whispered. "A cosmology we've never seen before. The Earth isn't just hollow. It's layered, like a consciousness." Her words echoed against the stone. We moved on, slower now. The gallery narrowed into another tunnel, this one spiraling downward in long arcs. As we walked, a sound began to emerge, not loud, but constant. A hum, like quartz vibrating under pressure, interwoven with whispers just outside the range of hearing. I checked my recorder. It didn't pick up anything, but I heard it in my chest. So did Lucian. Then, as we rounded another curve, we saw it. The chamber. It was vast, so large, it seemed to warp the scale of reality. We stepped onto a ledge, overlooking a cathedral-sized hollow, its ceiling high above, covered in shimmering stalactites that pulsed with inner light. Mist curled in the air, clinging to the walls, glowing faintly green and violet. At the center of the chamber was a pit. Not just a hole, a vortex carved into the ground, with a spiral ramp circling its walls, descending further into darkness. Suspended above the pit hovered a sphere of blue light, rotating slowly, casting ripples on the stone around it. We stood in silence. Navarro muttered, "It's like we're inside a lung, like the earth is breathing." He wasn't wrong. There was a pressure in the air, subtle but present. Our ears adjusted constantly, like when flying at high altitude. And the walls, they weren't still. They pulsed gently like flesh responding to rhythm. I didn't want to touch them. Caroline approached the edge of the pit. She knelt and ran her hand over the glyphs carved into the ramp. Her fingers stopped on a symbol, shaped like a spiral overlaid with a crescent. "It means descent," she said, "or rebirth, or both." She looked up at me. "They want us to go deeper." That word, "they," hung in the air like a dagger. No one challenged it. We descended slowly, circling the ramp. The blue orb above us hummed softly, vibrating through the bones of the structure. We passed alcoves carved into the pit wall, each one containing a statue. Some human like others. Not. One resembled a tall, elongated humanoid with 7 fingers and no mouth. Another looked almost reptilian, yet draped in ceremonial robes. Each had a hand over its chest. "They're guardians," Caroline whispered. I asked her how she knew. "I don't," she said. "I just feel it." At the bottom of the spiral, we found the door. Bronze, ancient, inlaid with gold and obsidian veins that pulsed with warmth when we got close. A central disc sat in the middle, slowly spinning of its own accord. I reached out without thinking. The moment my palm touched the door, a tremor rippled through the stone, and the whispering stopped. Total silence fell. Even the orb above us dimmed. Then the door began to open. We stepped back, hearts thudding in our ears. Beyond the threshold lay darkness, not the absence of light, but the presence of something deeper. A place where the rules of surface reality no longer applied. Lucien turned to me. "You still want to go in?" he asked. I nodded. I didn't come all this way to turn back. Not when I was finally standing on the threshold of the Earth's greatest secret. Not when the hollow heart of the world had finally opened its eye. We stepped through the door as if crossing the threshold between reality and dream. What waited on the other side wasn't just darkness. It was a stillness so complete it made my skin crawl. The kind of silence that doesn't belong to absence, but to waiting. The passage ahead sloped downward wide enough for three to walk side by side. The walls were darker here, not just in color, but in essence. They shimmered faintly, with tiny flecks of iridescent stone that seemed to pulse with our breath or our heartbeat. Or something deeper. Lucien lit his second lantern. Its glow stretched farther than the first, illuminating symmetrical markings carved into the stone spirals. Within spirals, intersecting triangles and shapes that shifted if you stared too long. Not illusions, just unfamiliar geometry, Caroline whispered. This place wasn't built for human eyes. We didn't answer. The further we moved in, the more the air changed. It thickened. It pressed against our skin. Not with malice, but with awareness. We weren't alone. After nearly 20 minutes of descent, the tunnel opened into a vaulted hall. No one spoke. Above us stretched a ceiling etched with stars that didn't match any known constellation. They twinkled not with light, but with shadow, their outlines glowing faintly, as if drawn in reverse flame. And below our feet, the floor reflected them perfectly like glass. I knelt to touch it. It was solid stone, yet it moved rippling gently, like the surface of water remembering wind. Lucien stepped into the center of the chamber, looking upward. Are we underground or in a memory? Caroline didn't respond. She was transfixed by a massive mural on the left wall. It depicted two worlds, one above, one below, connected by a single tree, whose roots glowed brighter than its leaves. Around the base of the tree there were creatures. Some bore wings, others horns. Some had no faces at all. She whispered, "This is a story." "What kind of story?" I asked. She looked at me, her eyes unreadable. "One where we are not the first." I should have laughed. I should have dismissed it as metaphor. But something deep inside me, something older than doubt, believed her. We moved onward. The hall gave way to a long corridor, flanked by pillars carved with symbols that made the air vibrate as we passed. The symbols didn't glow. They pulsed. And the farther we walked, the less the rules of the world held steady. I noticed it first when Lucien dropped his canteen. It didn't fall. It hovered an inch above the ground, then rotated slowly like caught in invisible currents. Caroline reached out to it. Her fingers brushed the surface, and a crackle of light zipped through her hand. She gasped, but didn't pull back. "Electromagnetic distortion," I offered. "No," she said. "Something else. Something harmonic." We pressed on. The corridor opened into a chamber far older than anything we'd seen. Bones lined the walls, massive, fossilized, and arranged with ceremony. Some resembled whales. Others did not. Reptilian, avian, hybrid. At the center of the room stood a monolith, black as void, its surface smooth except for a single handprint, elongated, six-fingered, pressed deep into the stone, as if it had melted it. Lucien stepped forward, drawn like a moth to flame. His hand hovered near the imprint, trembling. "It feels like it's calling." Caroline gripped his wrist. "Not yet." And just then, the room shifted. I don't mean metaphorically. The very chamber bent subtly, but undeniably. Angles turned inwards. Light curved. Gravity swayed. It was like standing inside a thought. And in the corner of my eye, something moved. A shimmer in the mist. A shape. A presence. It didn't advance. It didn't speak. It simply was. I turned to face it, heart racing. It had no form I could name. Like smoke wearing a cloak of memory. But its eyes, if you could call them, that glowed with recognition. Not threat, not welcome. Recognition. And I remembered something too. Not clearly. Not fully, but like a forgotten name on the edge of your tongue. A presence I had known before my birth. A voice I had heard in dreams before language. The shape receded as silently as it had come. We stood frozen. None of us said a word. What could we say? Eventually we continued, past a bridge suspended over a river of golden liquid, past inscriptions that pulsed in rhythms, matching our heartbeats, past alcoves that seemed to whisper memories that weren't ours, until we reached the next door. This one was different, twice the height of the last, flanked by statues of bird-headed beings holding burning orbs in each hand. Their gaze felt alive. Their stone robes flowed like fabric. Above the door, a sigil carved into the arch pulsed with fire. We were meant to cross this threshold, but not unchanged. Lucian turned to us. This isn't an exploration anymore. No, Caroline agreed. It's initiation. And in my chest I felt it too. We weren't just discovering something lost. We were becoming something remembered. The doorway did not open with sound. It parted like fogstone, sliding without friction, revealing a space that glowed violet from within. Not the sharp glow of artificial light, but something soft, pulsing, like a memory relived. Mist curled at our feet as we stepped forward. And with each step, the sensation deepened that we were no longer walking through space, but through time. The passage led into a hall, unlike any we had seen. It felt like entering a forest made of stone. Giant pillars rose around us, branching at the ceiling like roots in reverse. The architecture echoed something arboreal yet divine. There were no sharp lines, no harsh angles, only curves and flow, like wind preserved in architecture. Lucian whispered, "This place is alive." And I agreed. I felt it too. The stone beneath us hummed with vibration. It didn't pulse in one frequency, but many layered like chords in a forgotten song. Every footstep we took sent a ripple across the surface, as if the floor were listening. At the center of the hall stood a structure part altar, part sculpture. A humanoid figure, kneeling, hands cupped upward, cradling a sphere of light. Its face was worn smooth, as if time had erased its identity on purpose. But its posture was reverent, still. Caroline stepped closer. She raised her lantern, casting golden arcs across the figure. Then she gasped. "Look at the hands," she said. We did. Beneath the orb, etched into the figure's stone palms, were dozens of symbols. Some we recognized from before, spirals, crescents, sunburst glyphs. But now, they moved. Not literally, but in perception. Like they rearranged themselves each time you looked. "They're not words," Caroline said. "They're memories." I asked what she meant. She shook her head. "I don't know. I just feel it." And then something changed. The orb in the statue's hands began to glow brighter, casting rays upward into the chamber's ceiling. The roots above caught the light, and suddenly, like curtains drawn aside, the room shifted. We were no longer alone. Images filled the chamber, not ghosts but echoes, holograms carved from light and memory. They played like scenes in a theater, a city of crystal and stone, suspended beneath a glowing sun inside the earth. Towers curled like shells, bridges woven like spider silk. Beings walked its paths, tall, elongated, serene. They moved without sound, communicating through gestures and light. One raised a hand to the sky, the others followed. Then came darkness, a breach, some great upheaval. From above, war descended. Fire rained into the inner world. Creatures of flesh and bone, armored in steel and fear. The two worlds clashed. Chaos, ruin, collapse, then silence. The scene faded. Lucian stood frozen. "It was real," he whispered. "This isn't mythology, this is history." I didn't argue. A nearby wall caught my eye, translucent crystal like frozen smoke. Within it, images flickered. Not the same as the projection, these were individual, personal. I saw a memory of a being cradling a childlike creature with 6 arms. Another image, what looked like a burial beneath glowing mushrooms. These weren't just memories, they were records, a library carved from light and mind. Caroline reached out, pressing her palm against the wall. The image changed. It showed her, not her exact likeness, but close enough. A figure in red standing on a mountaintop surrounded by storm. She pulled her hand back, eyes wide. It recognized me. I felt a tremor in my chest. Lucian, had wandered to the far side of the chamber. There he stood before a mural, this one different. Less decorative, more like a warning. It showed two Earths, one dark, one light. Between them, a crack. A tree at the center splitting in half. From the darkness, figures rose, winged serpentine crowned in fire. From the light, beings with mirrored eyes cloaked in starlight. In the middle, us, human figures, divided, torn. Carved beneath the mural in a language none of us spoke was a single glowing line. Caroline translated slowly. You are the echo between two hearts. The air grew heavier. A wind blew through the chamber, impossible this far underground. But we felt it, heard it. And with it came the sound of voices, not speaking, singing. A low harmonic chant like dozens of voices layered into one. It didn't come from any direction. It came from within. From the walls, from the stone. The orb in the statue's hands began to pulse again. Brighter, louder. I reached toward it, not to touch, but to listen. And I heard it. A voice singular now, not in words, in memory. It said, "You are not the first to descend, but you may be the last to return." And then silence. We stood still, breath caught, hearts racing. And the orb dimmed. The light vanished. The chamber fell back into mist and stone. But the memory remained. Inside us, we thought the visions would end with the fading of the light. But they hadn't. As we moved deeper into the temple, the space itself seemed to respond to us not as intruders, but as questions. Each step forward unlocked something not just in the environment, but in ourselves. The next chamber opened like a breath. The walls were smoother here, dark, almost black, with veins of soft blue light pulsing just beneath the surface. They resembled neural pathways, like the place was built to think. It gave the impression that we were walking through a brain, or perhaps through the memory of one. In the center stood a mirror, not glass, not metal, obsidian, tall and round like a gateway. It stood unsupported, hovering just above the floor, humming softly, with a sound only felt in the bones. We approached as a group, and the moment we did, it awakened. The surface shimmered like oil, catching fire, and the reflection began to shift, not mirroring our present selves, but twisting into something older. Each of us saw a version of ourselves cloaked in ceremonial robes, eyes glowing with inner light, standing in a world of crystal domes and forests lit from within. I felt a pang of familiarity. Not memory, recognition, Caroline gasped. She raised a hand to the mirror, and her reflection did not mimic her. It moved ahead of her, knowing, guiding, waiting. Lucian stepped closer. Is it showing who we were? Or who we could have been? I murmured. The mirror rippled again. This time it showed the earth not as we know it, but as a spiral. Two worlds coiled around each other, outer and inner, connected by thin threads of gold. Pulses ran along those threads like lifeblood between siblings. It wasn't just a map. It was a body. It was us. I don't think we were meant to just observe, Caroline said. Her voice was calm, steady. I think we're part of this. The mirror shifted once more. This time it showed the surface world. Modern cities, concrete towers, oceans, stained with oil skies, veiled with smoke. Then it pulsed, and that world cracked. The threads snapped. The golden lifeblood halted, and the inner world began to darken. A warning. Lucian clenched his fists. We broke it, he whispered. We broke the connection. I turned away from the mirror, unable to bear the image. The chamber pulsed, and another wall opened, a spiral ramp leading downward, lined with floating lights. We followed. The air thickened. Not unpleasantly, more like pressure building, as though the earth held its breath. The walls shimmered with visions that flickered at the edge of perception. I saw cities under oceans, towers crumbling into sand. Beings not human, not alien, but ancestral. Watching, always watching. We arrived at a hall filled with orbs. They floated in silence, suspended above a massive stone seat carved with symbols older than any language. Each orb pulsed with memory scenes from lives long extinguished. I saw one, a figure releasing a child into the arms of glowing beings beneath a radiant tree. Another orb showed war machines that cracked the crust of the world, spilling fire into the inner sanctum. And then, a scene of reconciliation. Two hands, one pale, one dark, touching through light. Caroline stepped forward. They tried to heal the breach. I understood. These weren't just memories. They were lessons, preserved not in books or tablets, but in consciousness itself. Lucian sat on the stone seat. The orbs drifted around him, hovering close, humming softly. He closed his eyes. When he opened them, he said only one word: echo. What? We're echoes, he said, not descendants, not invaders, we are them. Returning. The word settled in my chest like a seed cracking open. All at once, the chamber began to shift. The walls fell away, not literally, but in perception. We saw through them, saw the earth from within, its crust thin and fragile, its outer shell glowing softly in blue. A heartbeat slowed, and behind it all, something watching. Not a being, not a god, but a memory so vast, so old, it had become the foundation of reality itself. The earth knew us, and it had called us back not as saviors, but as witnesses. Caroline placed her hand on the wall, and it responded symbols, lighting up around her like fireflies. She turned to us. There's more. We nodded, and we walked onward, not just into the earth, but into the forgotten parts of ourselves. We walked without words, not out of fear or reverence, but because something had shifted. We were no longer just explorers. We had crossed into a realm that spoke a language beyond speech, one of resonant symbol and memory. The passage ahead curved gently, as if following the spine of the earth itself. It shimmered with a soft crystalline light, and symbols lined the walls, not carved this time, but grown. They glowed like constellations arranged not in space, but in meaning. Caroline said they felt like music translated into geometry. Each step we took the corridor responded, not visually, but emotionally. I felt warmth, sorrow, awe, like walking through the archive of a soul. Lucian stopped staring at a floating stone tablet that had risen from the floor. Its surface rippled with languages, some ancient, others unfamiliar, and some terrifyingly intimate. One line shone brighter than the rest. Caroline translated slowly. To forget is survival. To remember is return. She turned to me. They weren't just preserving history. They were preserving identity. And perhaps I thought they knew that identity is the first thing a world sacrifices when it loses balance. The corridor opened into a round chamber bathed in a gold-green glow. At the center pulsed a structure unlike anything we had yet seen, a massive root-entwined core shaped like a heart. It beat slowly, rhythmically, casting pulses through the floor and walls. We approached as if drawn by tide. The heart was not biological, but it felt alive. Its roots stretched through the stone, feeding into veins of crystal, connecting every chamber we had passed through. It was a node, a memory organ, maybe even a soul. Caroline stepped closest. Her breath caught. It's dreaming, and I believed her. The pulses weren't random, they followed a pattern, like someone asleep locked in memory, or perhaps remembering us. Lucien knelt beside one of the glowing roots. This is why we were called. Because it's dying, I asked. No, he said softly. Because it's waking up. At that moment, the chamber shifted. The roots lifted, not threatening, but revealing. Beneath the heart, the floor opened like a flower, revealing a spiral of stairs, made not from stone, but from light. Thin threads of it hummed upward into a white mist that danced like breath. Caroline turned to me. We're being invited in. I hesitated. To what? She shook her head. To ourselves. We descended. The staircase narrowed as it rose, paradoxically lifting us upward while burrowing deeper into the earth. Logic twisted. Gravity faded. For a moment, I felt weightless, not just in body, but in spirit. When we emerged into the next chamber, it was not a room. It was a vision. The space was vast, dome-shaped, its walls made of flowing light and memory. Scenes flickered around us, not projections, but remembrances. Humanity's rise, cities built and broken, fires lit, wars waged, oceans crossed, truths lost. But we weren't alone in the visions. Beside every scene walked others, tall, luminous, translucent, beings of the inner world, watching, guiding, mourning. The stories wove together. And in every epoch, every triumph and tragedy was the same spiral, drawn in fire or ash or bone. Lucian whispered, "They tried to reach us again and again, and we forgot," Caroline said, almost like a prayer. "No," I said. "We were taught to forget." The chamber dimmed. Before us now stood a wall tall and translucent like the surface of still water. As we neared it, it changed, reflected not our appearances, but our inner selves. Not images, but imprints. Our fears, our longings, our truths. I saw myself as a child staring at the stars, begging the world to mean something more. I saw Caroline, older than she was, standing at a great rift, holding both sides together with light. Lucian was weeping. He saw himself, alone in a future he had never spoken of, surrounded by ruins, the last to remember. The wall pulsed, and then a choice appeared. Two paths opened before us, one golden wide lit with harmony and song. The other, narrow-shadowed, pulsing with unrest. Not evil, just true, unsoftened, unearned. We understood. The wide path was the world as we wished it to be, gleaming, painless, distant. The narrow was the path of return, of reckoning, of remembering pain so we could finally heal. Lucien turned to me. "We can't go forward as strangers to ourselves." "No," I agreed. "We go as echoes that must become voice." We stepped into the narrow path. The chamber closed behind us, and ahead the final veil shimmered, not to keep us out, but to let us in, not as explorers, but as parts returning to the whole. The veil did not shimmer its side. As we stepped forward, the air around us shifted. A light, soft as breath, yet older than memory, parted before us like a curtain in deep water. It revealed not a room, not a hall, but a space without shape. A space that seemed to remember itself as we entered it. There were no walls, no floor, only mist, light, and the faint sound of time slowing. We hovered, feet touching something not quite stone, not quite air. The chamber formed itself around us as if remembering what it used to be, a temple. Spiraling pillars rose from the mist, reaching into an unseen sky that arched with constellations I didn't know, and yet did. Stars moved backward. Moons shifted colors. It was not our cosmos, but a memory of one. In the center of it all stood the temple. Not a building, not a structure. A presence shaped like a place. Its walls were translucent, grown like coral, spiraling inward toward a glowing heart that pulsed like a second sun. The architecture defied reason, floors above us, sideways, inside out, yet we understood it, like dream logic. Perfect nonsense that made emotional sense. Caroline whispered, "We've entered a space where time is stored." I felt it too. Every breath carried echoes. Every movement felt like a ripple in water that had been still for eons. Lucian walked ahead, eyes wide, reverent. "This is the cradle." "What cradle?" I asked. He looked up. "Of everything we've forgotten." We crossed a bridge made of woven light, no rails, no ends, stretching into the heart of the temple. Along its sides floated objects, hourglasses suspended mid-turn. Within each scenes, played in grains of light, cities, rising towers, crumbling people praying to stars that no longer existed. Some scenes felt familiar. Others filled us with sorrow we could not name. Their memories, Caroline said, preserved. "Of who?" I asked. She looked around. "Everyone." We reached the temple's threshold. There, a great arch stood, one side glowing with golden runes, the other with shifting silver. As we approached, the symbols rearranged themselves, not into language, but into feeling. The arch did not open. It knew who was ready. Caroline stepped forward first. The symbols turned blue, soft and fluid. A melody filled the air, gentle, like wind through leaves. The arch parted. She walked through without hesitation. Lucian followed. His path burned red and violet colors of loss, of war, of penance. When he passed beneath the arch, he wept. I remained. The arch regarded me, not as a judge, as a reflection. I thought of the little boy who used to draw spirals in the margins of books, who stared at the stars hoping they'd stare back, who believed the world was hiding something sacred just out of reach. The arch turned dark green, the color of patience, of endurance. It opened. I stepped through. Inside there was no roof, no floor, only space and a tree. The tree. The same one carved into the murals, whispered in dreams, burned into cave walls across continents. It rose before us, roots descending into mist, branches woven into galaxies. Its leaves glowed with symbols I could feel in my chest. It was not alive in the way we understand life. It was awareness. Caroline stood at its base, eyes closed, hands raised. Lucian kneeled, trembling, one hand pressed to the roots. The tree responded to both, its light flickering in pulses that matched their breath. When I touched it, I felt everything. Not metaphorically, I felt everything. The birth of stars, the slow dance of tectonic plates, the first words ever spoken by human lips, the loneliness of oceans, the pain of separation, the joy of recognition. And beneath it all, a question. Not asked in words, asked in being. Will you carry us forward? I had no voice, no breath, but I answered in every cell, yes. The tree pulsed, and the temple trembled with light. Above us, the ceiling of stars parted, revealing a staircase carved not of matter, but memory. Each step, a moment, a choice, a turning point. It spiraled upward into a mist so bright, it seemed to erase doubt. Lucian turned to me, eyes still wet. We're not done. No, I said. This was never about arrival, it's about remembering how to go back. Caroline smiled, not with triumph, but peace. And we climbed, not out of the temple, but through the center of ourselves, toward the light that waits not at the end of the world, but at the beginning of our truth. There is a moment, just before transformation, when silence feels like eternity. As we ascended the memory staircase, time dissolved. The steps were not stone or light, but choices, moments echoing from the past and pulling us upward through our own becoming. Around us spun fragments of lives not ours, and yet somehow familiar. We saw ourselves in them, not as observers, but as roots in the same tree. The chamber we entered was white, not colorless, but absolute. It vibrated like a note held just beyond hearing. The space bent around us as if time itself hesitated before stepping forward. Lucian disappeared first, not vanished, but taken. He stepped onto a spiral glyph that pulsed with violet flame, and his body slowed, then unraveled into shimmering fragments like ash rising into stars. We called out, but no sound left our mouths. He didn't scream. He smiled. Caroline knelt at the base of a rotating wheel of gold symbols. Her hands hovered above its edges, and the wheel responded, turning slowly, revealing images, temples, buried blood, spilled songs sung to the stars. Her tears did not fall. They rose upward like prayers absorbed into the air. And then I was alone. The room, if it could be called that, breathed with knowing. Before me, a final threshold, no door, no wall, only a presence that waited. I approached. But it stopped me. Not physically, existentially. A question, again. Who are you, if not what you remember? I stood silent. Then came the flood. I saw myself as a boy in the attic reading books forbidden by doctrine. I saw the shame I carried for asking questions no one wanted answered. I saw the moment I first found the phrase "hollow earth" scribbled in the margin of an old journal, and felt something inside me stir. I saw my grandfather whispering stories of the great tree beneath the world before age took his mind. I saw every moment I had denied myself the truth because the world demanded silence, and the presence whispered again. You have always known, you have only forgotten your role. The light shifted, the mist cleared, and there before me stood the tree. Again, its roots suspended above nothingness, its branches woven with stars that hadn't yet been born. At its heart burned a flame, not fire, not heat, but memory, pure and vast. I stepped toward it. The flame pulsed, and shadows rose, not threats, but echoes. I saw Lucian, not as the man I knew, but as a keeper from another age tending to sacred stones beneath desert sand. I saw Caroline robed in white standing before a choir of children beneath an underground sun. And I saw myself, not one version but many, a wanderer crossing glaciers with only the stars to guide him, a monk hiding scrolls beneath temple floors, a nameless scribe engraving spirals onto stone. We had all returned, because we had all come before. The flame rose and my voice spoke from within it. That you were never meant to witness. You were meant to remember and to remind. The flame leapt into my chest, not painfully, but with purpose. And suddenly I understood. This was not just the secret of a lost empire. It was the echo of Earth's soul, fragmented through time, scattered in story, whispered in legend, buried beneath ice and stone. And I was its storyteller. That's why the Earth called me, not because I was special, but because I listened, because I still believed there was something sacred in the silence. A final doorway appeared, shaped of light and gravity, warping gently with unseen breath. It had no lock, no barrier, just the knowing. I turned once, back to the temple, to the stair, to the tree. Everything shimmered, not goodbye, but transmission. I walked forward, through the threshold, into the heart of remembrance, and the earth sang again. I don't know how long I walked. Time had dissolved inside the temple, and now it returned in fragments, moments, stitched together by breath and heartbeat. The light that had welcomed me burned behind me, now fading with each step, not from absence, but from completion. The path forward was dim. Crystalline walls glimmered like wet stone, and the tunnel narrowed, wrapping around me like the inside of a throat. It felt like birth, like being carried upward one slow heartbeat at a time. I was alone. Caroline and Lucien, whether changed or dissolved or awakened, had not come with me. Not physically, but I felt them still, not behind, not ahead, but within. Their memories had folded into mine like chapters in a single, shared book. As I climbed, the air cooled. The scent of ice returned. The mist thinned. I passed walls that once glowed, but now flickered dimly, like dreams forgotten upon waking. Murals cracked, glyphs faded. The corridor was not rejecting me, it was releasing me. I whispered a thank you, and the silence answered. I came to a chamber I didn't recognize. Collapsed, broken, filled with signs of our arrival weeks before. Torn rope, an old lantern, footprints frozen in half-melted snow. Time, it seemed, had folded back upon itself. Or perhaps I had left and arrived in the same breath. I touched the wall, where Caroline once translated a glowing line. The symbol was still there, but it no longer shone. The descent had been invitation. The return was choice. And I had chosen. I reached the vertical shaft, the one carved like a spiral scar into the earth, now silent and still. I climbed with hands and boots, the weight of the cold pressing down again, different now. Less brutal, more honest. Like the earth reminding me that truth and comfort rarely travel together. When I reached the top, the last veil of ice parted. The sky greeted me with wind and white. Gray clouds churned overhead. Snow drifted silently. My breath fogged again. And in that moment, I remembered I was a body again. A man, not a vessel. Not a spark. Just skin and bone shivering beneath an uncaring sun. But inside me, something had changed. I did not tremble. I stood. The polar plain stretched around me in all directions, empty as a blank page. The outpost was gone, swallowed by time or by design. No tents, no signals, no signs that any of it had ever happened. But I didn't panic. I didn't scream. I pulled the journal from my pack. It was warm to the touch. I opened it to the last page, the one that had been blank when I entered the temple. Now it was full. Words I hadn't written, drawn in my own hand. Maps, symbols, warnings. Names I didn't recognize, but that felt like family. One phrase repeated at the bottom in a language I now understood without translating. You are not the end of the story. You are the beginning of memory. I closed the journal and sat down in the snow. I waited for what I didn't know. Perhaps rescue, perhaps death. But what came was a raven. It landed a few feet from me, black against the white. Its eyes shimmered gold for a moment, just enough to make me wonder if it had come from below. It croaked once, then lifted into the sky. I followed its flight with my eyes, and then I walked, each step lighter than the one before. I wasn't leaving the hollow earth behind. I was carrying it with me, not as myth, not as secret, but as truth. And if the world above refused to listen, then I would speak louder. If they called me mad, then let madness be the price of memory. Because I had seen the tree, I had touched the flame, and I would not forget. I returned to the world above with no proof. No samples, no photographs, no team beside me. Just a journal full of symbols and memories carved into the quiet places behind my eyes. The Arctic sky welcomed me back, not with fanfare, but with silence. The same silence I had once feared now, filled with meaning. I walked until I found the edge of human activity. Again, a weather station, a broken satellite relay, the echo of electricity humming like a heartbeat beneath the snow. They didn't believe me. They never do. The man who found me months later thought I was a lost survivalist. He took me to a hospital in Tromsø. They ran tests, blood work, neurology. My heart beat too slow. My brain waves flickered oddly when I slept. The doctors wrote it off as trauma, isolation, maybe mild psychosis. But in my dreams, I saw the tree every night. It pulsed, not with light, but with remembering. So I left. I rented a cabin high in the mountains, far from cities, from phones, from the need to explain. I lit fires at night. I wrote, I drew, I traced every symbol I could remember, not from the journal, but from inside me. They came back like a song, long forgotten, but always waiting on the tongue. Maps emerged, maps not just of land, but of meaning. Lines of connection, ley lines. The same spiral drawn on temple walls in Peru, in the catacombs of Rome, on the robes of Mongol shamans. All different, all the same. I realized something sitting alone one night, staring at a flickering candle. The hollow earth was never a place. It was a memory of who we were before war, before industry, before forgetting became survival. And we buried it. Not to hide it, but to protect it, because truth is fragile, and it only survives when carried with reverence. I tried to share what I'd seen. A paper at a conference ignored. A podcast interview deleted after one episode. A book draft rejected. So I stopped trying to convince, and I started planting seeds. I left pages of the journal in libraries, folded into used books at antique stores. I carved a symbol into a stone at the foot of a forest shrine. I taught the story to children in quiet towns, shaped it like myth, made it soft enough to be heard. And slowly it grew. I received letters handwritten unmarked. I dreamed of the staircase of light. I remember the flame. I saw the tree before I knew your name. I was not alone. They were waking up too. Maybe not all at once, but in whispers, in echoes. And one day, someone will go deeper than I did. They will find the temple not as mystery, but as inheritance. And they will not be turned away. Because the earth does not forget. It waits. It sings in silence and in symbols. And it remembers who listens. So I write, not for fame, not for proof, but because I must. Because the spiral is not a conspiracy. It is a calling. And if you have felt it, seen it drawn in frost on your window, or carved into the back of your dreams, then remember this: you are not mad. You are not broken. You are only returning, like I did, to the fire beneath the ice, to the world behind the world, to what the earth remembered when we forgot.